And joining me now to discuss this further is Navvar Saban. He's an analyst at the Omran Center for Strategic Studies, and retired US Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt. He is former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs under George W. Bush. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
Let's begin with you. Tell us about the Manbij roadmaps. 3 phases, 1, 2 almost over, joint patrols, independent patrols, north and south of the Syrian river.
Yep.
And now the 3rd phase. Tell us about that.
Well, the most important thing to recognize is that the overall objective is to ensure that Manbij is no longer seen as a YPG sanctuary, that it relieves the concerns that Turkey has, that there is a YPG presence as agreed, that they would not be on the west side of the Euphrates. So there will be some more implementation that goes on. It will be conditions-based. But we believe that the agreement struck between Secretary Pompeo and the Foreign Minister of Turkey is moving along well, and we fully expect it to be honored and implemented.
How do you see the elections playing into all of this? Because now you have more certainty in Ankara. How do you think Washington is looking at the elections and the relationship moving forward with Manbij and elsewhere?
You and I have talked about this before, and I've said this many times. Manbij was an unnecessary distraction in the relationships between the United States and Turkey, particularly with the NATO summit coming up. I think this will be a great opportunity for President Erdogan and President Trump to reaffirm the strong commitment between our two countries, not only as bilateral allies, but as allies within NATO. That is the most important issue at play here, and Manbij demonstrates on both sides that we want to move forward.
What about the F-35s and this push to stop the transfer of those planes to Turkey?
Look, this is not all unicorns and happiness at this point. We still have some considerable issues that we have with all of our allies. This is not a
Then the Americans are raising concern about the S-400s, putting sanctions and all of that. What's going on there, General?
Well, I mean, look, again, S-400s, we believe, are an unnecessary defense system inside of Turkey, because what it does is it makes it harder for Turkey to get the intelligence and the ISR, the surveillance and reconnaissance, because we can't share it with the S-400 system. We look at NATO as an alliance. We should all be working together. We saw the S-400 as perhaps a poke in the eye of the United States for some other bilateral issues.
Greece has Russian interceptors.
They do, but they're much further away from the action than Turkey is.
And I want to bring in our friend here as well, Navvar. Navvar, how do you see this understanding between the Americans and the Turks in the larger context of what's happening in Syria? In Dara, we've got the Russians and the regime bombing civilian neighborhoods.
This kind of, first of all, this kind of agreement that's happened between the Turkish side and the American side, as Manbij being a distraction, this kind of agreement was like something. Eventually it's going to happen, because it saved the Turkish part, another operation, military operation in the area. You're talking about a Manbij area, a huge area of more than around like 1,800 km square, have a lot of civilian and American presence and French presence.
I want to break in here. You're talking about a lot of civilians in that area. Most of these refugees or internally displaced Syrians that have fled from elsewhere,
right.
Yep.
5 or 6 million of them have ended up in Turkish-controlled areas, which is part of a de-escalation zone as well in Idlib. And now you have Bashar al-Assad coming out and saying that he's going to take it by force if necessary. What does that mean, Navvar?
Let's talk about like Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian regime said a lot of stuff. For example, they said they are not using barrel bomb. They said that there isn't any Iranian military presence in Syria. For me, it's just a publicity stunt. You're talking about an area that's controlled by an international agreement. There is an international environment that is leading for this agreement.
Between Russia, Iran, Turkey, even the US now?
There is an agreement. So the Russian government, Damascus government cannot do anything. They can talk about it. Walid Muallim can talk about it. Bashar al-Assad can talk about it. Talk about whatever they want. But physically, they can't do anything about it. There is an agreement, and it's going on.
I want to turn the conversation slightly towards Manbij as well and bring in some graphics for our viewers of what this roadmap, Manbij roadmap, means on the ground. So, well, it's a joint agreement to secure the city jointly. It means that the Sajur River, 12 kilometers north of Manbij city, has become a front line of sorts between the Turkish forces to the north and the YPG held south, even though the US has now started patrolling this particular boundary as well. YPG doesn't want to move out. In fact, it's SDF-linked Manbij Military Council has come out and said Turkey will never be allowed inside Manbij. General.
It's unfortunate that they would say that, because the United States has always said our relationship with these forces as temporary and tactical. There was no expectation, and there should be no expectation, that if that's the position the YPG holds, that the United States is going to stand behind them on this particular issue. Our agreement with Turkey is our agreement with Turkey. It is not with the YPG or the SDF inside of Manbij.
And then finally, towards a solution, Turkey, Manbij, US, there's a corridor there, Euphrates Shields territories, Afrin, and that area, in the bigger picture of it, where does this now end? Are we seeing the end game as far as Syria is concerned in Dara play out, the last pocket of resistance for the regime?
No, you're not seeing the end game. You're seeing a whole different phase now in different areas, in the north, in the east, in the south. You're talking about lots of forces on the ground, militias, in different areas. Even you're talking about a fragile security situation, even in Afrin, Euphrates Shield, even in the Eastern Front. So it's a very different kind of phase that need more focus. It's not a war now. It's not something like opposition and regime. It's now something like everyone's fighting everyone for their own control. And now, for example, let's say even in ISIS, the regime and the Russian declared that they were able to vanquish ISIS. Now ISIS is hiding in the desert. And the general knows
around
that
Dara, there's a little pocket of ISIS as well.
You know that you cannot secure the desert. It's different. Now ISIS
on the Golan.
is using the hit and run tactics, and it's for them it's something wonderful. They can come out from the desert, kill whoever they want, and for them this is a victory. Now you don't know where to attack ISIS.
Yeah, but the US says, now bring in General Kimmitt here as well, that ISIS is largely defeated, that we have to slowly start pulling out of Syria.
Sure, let's take a look at where things were in 2014. There was a caliphate, there was a capital, there was ground being taken by ISIS all the way primarily to the gates of Baghdad. Look where it is now. It is virtually defeated, but we still have work to do to ensure that that area in the desert doesn't remain a safe haven and sanctuary. That's why the coalition remains inside of Syria right now. The only purpose for the coalition to be inside of Syria is to defeat and destroy ISIS, and we will continue to do that as long as it's necessary, but not 1 second longer.
Does it mean
necessary.
eventually then, not just for the US, but for everyone to normalize some sort of relations with Bashar al-Assad?
I think that's
Will that
right.
be acceptable?
Well, we see now the SDF and the YPG reaching out to the regime for the purpose of negotiation to get back on that political track. Let's be candid. The situation on the ground at this point has the regime on its front foot. I don't think that negotiations are going to happen anytime soon, because nobody comes to the negotiating table when they're winning. And right now, despite the fact that it is this evil triad between Russia, Iran, and the Syrian government that is winning, facts on the ground, they are winning. So they will come to an accommodation.
I'll give you the last word, Navvar.
Yeah, about the, this is when these forces need to talk to the regime, in my opinion, and it's something physical. The regime is there and he's winning, but his partner are doing all the job. So, for example, eastern part of Syria, and you know that the Iranian-backed militia control a lot, but the Iranians now have something else to count on. They build their own local forces called LDF. Something different than the NDF, and the LDF is part of the military, the Syrian military. So now it's
integrated into
exactly. It. Now they saved a position for them in the military. In the future, if they tell them remove your militia, okay, I will remove my militia. I saved my own place. Even Hezbollah controlled Al-Rida forces, controlled
and now they all have Syrian IDs.
Exactly. So we go out, we will stay, and any kind of negotiation with the regime have to go through us.
Thank you so much, General Kimmitt, Navvar.
Thank you.